Eleanor Vance's penthouse apartment was a monument to success and solitude. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a sprawling city glittering with Christmas lights she couldn't feel. The air, conditioned to a precise 68 degrees, smelled of nothing. On the marble island in her minimalist kitchen sat a single glass of brutally expensive scotch and an unopened prospectus for a new acquisition. It was Christmas Eve, and like the 7 before it, she was utterly, profoundly alone. This was the price of her empire, the high wall she'd built around the rubble of a past betrayal. A sharp, hesitant knock echoed through the cavernous space. It was an impossible sound. No one came to her private floor unannounced. Security would have stopped them. Frowning, she watched the security feed on her tablet. A man in a worn but clean coat stood holding the hand of a small girl, who clutched a wooden doll with a broken leg. They looked lost and cold. Against every instinct honed by years of corporate warfare and emotional isolation, she pressed the button to speak. "Can I help you?" Her voice was clipped, unused. "So sorry to bother you, ma'am." The man's voice was warm, a stark contrast to the sterile intercom. "We live a few floors down. The elevator malfunctioned and my daughter, well, her favorite toy took a tumble." He held the doll up to the camera. "I'm a carpenter, and I saw the name Vance Industries on the building directory. I know it's a long shot, but your company makes high-end adhesives. I was hoping, I just need a drop of something strong to fix this before Christmas morning." Eleanor stared at the screen. A carpenter, a child, a broken doll. It was a scene from a sentimental movie she would have scoffed at. Her world was one of leverage buyouts and hostile takeovers, not mending toys. Her first impulse was to send them away, to tell security to escort them back to their own world. But the little girl, no older than 6, looked up at the camera with wide, pleading brown eyes. Something in their shared vulnerability resonated in the barren landscape of Eleanor's heart. "Stay there," she said, her voice betraying a rustiness she hadn't noticed before. She walked to the door, the click of her heels on the polished concrete floor the only sound. She opened it a crack, the chain still on. The man, David, had a kind face etched with faint lines of worry and fatigue. He offered a small, apologetic smile. The little girl, Lily, hid shyly behind his leg. "I know this is a huge imposition," he began. Eleanor found herself unlatching the chain. "It's fine. Come in." The words felt foreign on her tongue. She led them not into her pristine living area, but toward the utility closet where she kept a toolbox for the building's maintenance staff. She retrieved a small tube of industrial-grade epoxy, the kind that could bond steel. "This should work. Be careful with it." David took it with a grateful nod. "Thank you, truly." He glanced around at the stark gallery-like space. It was beautiful, expensive, and as cold as a mausoleum. "You have a quiet place." "I prefer it," Eleanor stated flatly. Lily, however, had been drawn to the one spot of unintentional color in the room, a single wilting orchid on a side table. She pointed a tiny finger. "Your flower is thirsty." The observation was so simple, so direct, it disarmed Eleanor completely. She looked at the drooping plant, a gift from a sycophantic board member she'd forgotten to water. "I suppose it is." "We can help," Lily announced, her shyness evaporating. Before Eleanor could protest, David was already looking at her, a question in his eyes. "If you'll let us, it's the least we can do. I can fix the doll right here, and Lily can give your flower a drink. We'll be out of your hair in 10 minutes. Eleanor hesitated for a moment that felt like an eternity. 10 minutes? She could endure 10 minutes of this domesticity. She nodded stiffly, gesturing toward the kitchen. "The sink is over there," while Lily, with grave importance, carefully carried a small glass of water to the thirsty orchid. David laid a protective cloth from his pocket onto the marble island and began his delicate work. He handled the wooden doll with a surgeon's precision, his large hands surprisingly gentle. "You're good at that," Eleanor observed, leaning against the counter, a safe distance away. "My wife, Sarah, she loved things like this," David said, his voice soft, his eyes focused on his work. "Handmade things. She used to say that anything made with love could be mended with love." He paused, carefully applying a minuscule drop of the epoxy. "She passed away 3 years ago. It was sudden." The confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected. Eleanor's fortress of solitude was not equipped for such genuine, unprompted vulnerability. She didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," felt hollow and inadequate. "I was an architectural engineer," he continued, pressing the doll's leg back into place. "Long hours, lots of travel. After Sarah was gone, I looked at Lily and realized I couldn't be that man anymore. I couldn't outsource raising her, so I quit. Started my own custom furniture and repair business out of our apartment. It's not glamorous, but I'm there. I'm there to pick her up from school, to fix her toys when they break." He looked up, his gaze meeting hers directly. "Some things are more important than a corner office." The statement was not an accusation, but it landed like one in the silent opulence of her life. She thought of the meetings she'd never missed, the holidays she'd always worked, the empire she'd built brick by lonely brick. That Christmas Eve was a fracture in the frozen surface of Eleanor's life. David and Lily left after 20, though minutes, the doll perfectly mended, the orchid slightly less droopy. But their warmth lingered in the sterile air. The next Saturday, Eleanor found herself wandering through the public park near her building, a place she usually only saw from her penthouse window. She saw them near the carousel, Lily's laughter a bright melody against the gray winter sky. On impulse, she walked over. David's surprise was evident, but his smile was welcoming. "Ms. Vance, Eleanor, fancy seeing you here." "The flower is doing better," she said, the words feeling clumsy. Lily ran up to her. "Did you come to play?" And so it began. An unlikely routine bloomed in the dead of winter. Saturdays in the park became their unspoken appointment. Eleanor, in her tailored cashmere coats, learned the simple joy of pushing a child on a swing. She learned that David had a dry wit and a quiet strength that she found both unnerving and compelling. He never asked about her work, her wealth, or her life beyond these park meetings. He simply accepted her presence. One rainy Saturday, he invited her to their apartment for hot chocolate. Compared to her penthouse, his home was small and cluttered, but it was vibrant with life. Drawings were taped to the fridge, half-finished wooden projects sat on a workbench in the corner, and the air smelled of sawdust and cinnamon. It felt more real than anything she owned. He showed her the plans for a rooftop garden the tenants were trying to start. "The landlord gave us the space, but we're short on funding for the infrastructure, irrigation, soil, the works." Eleanor looked at the ambitious drawings. "It's a big project." "All good things are," he said simply. The next week, an anonymous donation was made to the Tenants Association, enough to fund the entire garden project and then some. David gave her a knowing look when he saw her the following Saturday, a silent question in his eyes. She just shrugged, a faint blush on her cheeks she hadn't felt in years. They started working on the garden together, tilling soil and building planter boxes. In the rich, dark earth, surrounded by the quiet hum of David's work and Lily's chatter, Eleanor felt a long, dormant part of herself beginning to unfurl. The neglected garden of her own heart was, for the first time, getting some sun. One cool spring evening, as they sat on a newly built bench in the flourishing rooftop garden, the city lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation, the comfortable silence between them felt different. It was deeper, more trusting. "Why do you keep your life so empty?" David asked gently, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. Eleanor looked away, at the skyline she had conquered. "It wasn't always," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I had a partner, in business and in life. His name was Marcus. We built Vance Industries from the ground up. I thought we were building a future." She took a shaky breath. "Then I found out he was embezzling, cooking the books to fund a side project he planned to launch after pushing me out. He was going to take everything. I loved him. I trusted him." She finally met David's gaze, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I had to choose. I could let him ruin me, or I could ruin him first. I gathered the evidence, exposed him, and took control of the company. I won. But in the process, I sealed myself off. I decided trust was a liability I couldn't afford." David reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, solid. "Protecting yourself isn't the same as punishing yourself, Eleanor." His words were a balm on a wound she hadn't realized was still open. Just as she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, her phone buzzed with an urgent alert from her COO. She read the message, and the fragile peace shattered. A hostile takeover bid had been initiated against Vance Industries. The buyer was a newly formed, aggressively funded private equity firm. The name of its principal partner made the blood drain from her face. Marcus Thorne. He was back. And he was coming for the last thing she had left of her old life. The following days were a blur of emergency board meetings, frantic calls with lawyers, and sleepless nights spent dissecting financial documents. The Eleanor of old resurfaced, sharp, ruthless, and tireless. The soft edges that had begun to form in the rooftop garden hardened once more into corporate armor. Marcus, true to form, didn't fight from a distance. He requested a face-to-face meeting. They met in the sterile conference room of her office, the same room where she had dismantled his career 8 years ago. He looked different, sleeker, colder, but with the same predatory glint in his eyes. "Eleanor," he began, his voice smooth as venom, "you've done well with the company, my company, our company. It was never your company, Marcus. You forfeited that right when you tried to steal it from me," she said, her voice like ice. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Always so dramatic. I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here to offer you a future. This takeover is happening. You can fight me, and we can drag this out in a messy public battle that will gut the company's value. Or you can be smart." He slid a folder across the polished table. "Merge with me. We'll combine forces. I'll give you a title, a golden parachute that will make you untouchable. We were good together, Eleanor, in business and otherwise." The implication hung in the air, sickening and foul. He saw her recent softness, her work on the garden, her time with David. He had clearly had her watched as weakness. "Don't let some handyman and his kid distract you from what's important," he sneered. "This is who you are. This is our world. Don't pretend you belong in his." He stood to leave. "You have 48 hours to accept my offer, or I will burn everything you've built to the ground." Marcus's ultimatum sent Eleanor into a spiral. The battle was no longer just about business. It was about her identity. He was trying to drag her back into the cold, cynical world she was just beginning to escape. She threw herself into the fight with an obsessive ferocity that left no room for anything else. She canceled on David and Lily for their Saturday park trip, then for a dinner they had planned. Her text became short, her voice strained. She was reviewing shareholder reports late one night when her private investigator called. "I found it, Ms. Vance," the PI said. "The seed money for Marcus's new firm. It's dirty, laundered through a shell corporation. If this gets out, he's not just finished in business, he's facing jail time." Eleanor held the key to Marcus's complete and utter destruction. The old Eleanor, the one forged in betrayal, would have used it without a second thought. It was the perfect weapon, a final, decisive victory. But as she sat in her silent, empty penthouse, the damning report glowing on her screen, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt hollow. She thought of David's words. Protecting yourself isn't the same as punishing yourself. Destroying Marcus now wouldn't be protecting her company. It would be revenge. It would mean becoming him, using his tactics, living in the same darkness. She had promised to help Lily build a birdhouse in the rooftop garden that weekend. A small, simple promise. In the chaos, she had completely forgotten. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture from David. Lily was holding up the finished birdhouse, a proud but lonely smile on her face. The text read, "We missed you today." The message broke through her armor. Staring at the photo, she saw the two paths before her with painful clarity. One led back to this cold, empty room, a victor in a war no one else cared about. The other led to a rooftop garden, to sawdust and laughter, to a life that was beginning to feel like home. The final board meeting was a Shark Tank. Marcus was there, flanked by his lawyers, radiating an unbearable smugness. He had the votes, or so he thought. He had swayed several key investors with promises of aggressive restructuring and massive short-term gains. He laid out his final, hostile offer. A predatory deal that would involve mass layoffs and selling off entire divisions of the company Eleanor had painstakingly built. "And so," Marcus concluded, looking directly at Eleanor, "the choice is yours, a graceful and very wealthy exit, or irrelevance." The room turned to Eleanor. They expected a counterattack, a legal bombshell, a vicious fight. Her team had the file from the PI, ready to deploy. They waited for her signal. Eleanor stood up, her hands steady on the mahogany table. She looked at Marcus, but she didn't see a rival. She saw a ghost from a life she no longer wanted. Mr. Thorne presents a compelling vision of the future, she began, her voice calm and clear, filling the tense silence. A future of leveraged assets and shareholder value above all else. A future I have, for a long time, subscribed to myself. She paused, letting the words sink in. But he's wrong. A company is not just a number on a balance sheet. It's people. It's the families they support, the communities they build. She looked around the table, at the faces of the people who had worked for her for years. I will not sell this company to a man who would tear it apart for profit, nor will I stoop to his level to win. She slid the PI's file back into her briefcase, untouched. Therefore, I am exercising my right as majority shareholder to refuse his offer. Furthermore, effective immediately, I am transferring my controlling shares into an employee-owned trust. This company will now belong to the people who built it. A stunned gasp filled the room. Marcus's face went from triumph to disbelief to pure rage. She was forfeiting a personal fortune in the billions. She was choosing integrity over victory. The aftermath was chaos. Marcus stormed out, his threats and curses echoing in the hallway. The board members erupted in a pandemonium of questions and frantic calls. Eleanor didn't stay to answer them. Her work there was done. She walked out of the building, leaving behind the empire she had both built and bled for, and felt nothing but an overwhelming sense of lightness. She knew where she had to go. She took a taxi not to her sterile penthouse, but to David's apartment building. She ran up the stairs to the rooftop garden. He was there, watering the tomato plants, the setting sun casting a golden glow around him. Lily was nearby, carefully placing seeds into a small pot. He saw her, and his expression was guarded, a mixture of concern and hurt from her recent distance. "Eleanor," he said simply. "I'm sorry," she said, the words rushing out of her. "I'm so sorry I disappeared. I was fighting a ghost, and I almost let him win." She told him everything about Marcus, the takeover, the dirty secret she'd uncovered, and the choice she had made in the boardroom. She explained that she had given up the company, the fortune, the entire life she had built. When she finished, breathless, he was silent for a long moment. He walked over to her, his hands smudged with soil, and gently cupped her face. He looked into her eyes, searching for something. He must have found it, because his guarded expression melted away, replaced by a look of profound admiration and love. "You didn't lose anything, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just chose what was real." He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that wasn't about passion or victory, but about coming home. Lily ran over, rapping, her small arms around Eleanor's legs. "Does this mean you can help me build a fairy house now?" she asked. Eleanor laughed, tears of joy finally streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, hugging the little girl tight. "Yes, it does." 1 year later, it was Christmas Eve again. The penthouse was sold, its stark white walls and cold marble floors a distant memory. Eleanor, David, and Lily now lived in a modest house with a big backyard just outside the city. A fire crackled in the hearth, illuminating a Christmas tree decorated with a mix of elegant glass ornaments and Lily's handmade creations. David was in the kitchen, humming along to a carol on the radio as he basted a turkey. Lily was carefully arranging the wooden doll, its leg perfectly mended, in a dollhouse David and Eleanor had built together. Eleanor stood by the window, watching the gentle snowfall blanket the thriving garden outside, a garden they had all planted. She was no longer a CEO, no longer a billionaire. She ran a small consulting firm that helped employee-owned businesses thrive. She had less, but she had never, ever had more. Love, she had learned, was not a liability, but the only asset that truly mattered.